Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Papenmeier and I will present our paper about product search dialogues and what we can learn from it for designing virtual assistants. So one problem that we frequently come across in product search is that customers or users are not always able to communicate what exactly they are looking for in a way that machines can understand. Sometimes users have some idea about a product which they are able to explain to another person, but once they have to type it into a machine, they do not find the right words or type only very little information. So it would be helpful if they could interact with search systems in natural language, like they would do in actual stores when they describe their needs to a salesperson. Technical solutions like voice assistants or chatbots are not yet refined enough to provide a good experience, and we kind of want to avoid a scenario like this where the system just blabs out things that the user does not understand. So we need good design guidelines that help us build usable and intuitive systems. So we asked ourselves, what can we learn from human-human conversations in product consulting? So in a setting where we have a knowledgeable expert and a customer who is advised on which product to buy. Ideally, we would look at in-store conversations, but with the pandemic, we instead chose an online setting via Zoom. We recruited 8 experts for 2 complex product domains where people have multifaceted information needs, namely recipe search and laptop search. I know that recipes are not a product in the traditional sense, but we wanted the domains to be rather different from each other so that we can see what are conversational strategies that are likely to be employed across many different domains. Okay, so let me give you a quick impression of how those conversations look like. Usually the experts started with general questions, which got the customer to talk about their needs. Then some more questions followed until the expert decided to have enough information. The expert then searched for a fitting product online and sent the link via Zoom's chat function. The customer was allowed to open the link and the conversation usually went on for a bit because the two were talking about the product until the customer eventually decided that this is indeed a suitable and relevant product. We did not restrict the number of links that were sent. In some cases, multiple links were sent, some to show an alternative product and some to provide an additional product, for example, a side dish that would go with the main dish. After recording 24 conversations, we transcribed the dialogues and annotated them with dialogue acts, which you can see here. The annotation process itself is described in more detail in the paper. So let's see which conversational strategies we found in the data. First, we looked at the distribution of dialogue acts of the utterances in the conversations. Already during the study, we noticed that the behavior of both interaction partners changed over time. And we can see this behavior reflected clearly in the distribution of the dialogue acts. You can see that before a product link was sent, 22% of the utterances from experts were questions, which then reduced to 13% after sending the link. For the customers, the change is not that apparent for the questions because we look at both domains here, but if we were to look at the laptop domain alone, we would see a stronger effect. But what you can see in the customer's behavior is that the informing reduces drastically after customers receive the link. Before, almost half of the customer's utterances were informing statements, which reduces to 18% after receiving the product link. So you see that the roles that experts and customers take on, those roles change during the conversation. We have a proactive expert in the beginning, actively inquiring the customer, who has a rather reactive role at that point. Then after the link was sent, the expert becomes the more informing agent, asking less questions and instead answering the customer's questions. We also took a closer look into the questions that the expert asked at the beginning of the conversations. So how did they elicit the information needs of the customer? Here we look at the first 3 questions asked in the conversation. In our language, we have different types of questions. So we can ask set questions, which are open questions, like what type of dish do you want to cook? Or we can ask choice questions, like do you want a black or a silver laptop? We can also ask propositional questions that can be answered by yes or no, like do you like tomatoes? And we can ask check questions that ask for agreement, like you wanted a salad, right? In our conversations, we saw the experts asking open questions in the beginning, trying to get a feeling for the customer's needs, followed by more specific questions that target something that the customer said, or asking for confirmation on an idea that has formed in the expert's mind. We understood this behavior as a strategy to elicit and identify the needs of the customers, going from broad, general questions to very specific questions that are adapted to the specific needs of this customer. Another observation we made when analyzing the conversations was the frequent communication of understanding, or the lack thereof. If we have another look at the distribution of dialogue acts, we see that both conversation partners very regularly used so-called auto-acts, which are utterances like okay or all right, but also interjections like were used. And sometimes, especially the experts did that, they repeated literally what the customer just said. If a customer said, I often paint digital art, so I need a large screen, the expert would respond with large screen. This is something that did not take up much time during the conversation because it was often just a single word. So you would not see that if we were looking at the distribution based on words, but here we are looking at the utterances, and you can see quite clearly that, especially in the first part of the conversation, where the experts were collecting the user needs, about 1/4 of the experts' utterances were auto-acts. So we see that this is really an important part of the conversations. Maybe because there's a difference in knowledge, so the experts uses it as a means to encourage the customer to continue talking and make them feel at ease. So what do our findings mean for the design of new conversational assistants in product search? From our findings, we derived some design recommendations. 1, systems should be proactively inquiring the users about their needs and be ready to answer questions about the products after presenting them. 2, systems should be able to narrow down the information needs, going from general questions to more user-specific questions. And lastly, systems should reassure the users that their input was received and understood. Users might not know the technical terms or think that they make unfitting requests, so it would be good to tell them if and what was understood by the system. Ideally, those recommendations make it easier for users to feel safe and well cared for when using virtual assistants for product search. There are some more detailed findings in our paper, and we'd be happy to discuss any questions or thoughts and comments with you. Thanks for listening.